And I tell people my key message is that you have to learn to struggle in the right direction. Life is a struggle daily, but when you struggle in the right direction, good things happen. I don't like to use the word motivation. I'm not trying to be a motivational speaker, because if I have to motivate you, you're my wrong person. I will work harder than anybody on the streets. I will work harder than the biggest crackhead that's out there. I will work harder than the best CEO that's out there.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to ALLSMITH. Today's guest is a true embodiment of transformation. He's the CEO and owner of Move Human Performance in Chandler, Arizona. He's a speaker and the author of the powerful book, Mind Over Virtually Everything. From former BMX racer to leader, coach, entrepreneur, he's built one of the most trusted hubs for physical therapy, performance training, recovery, and human development. But what I love is that his story goes even deeper. He's a man who rebuilt his life from rock bottom, a convicted felon who chose discipline over despair, ownership over excuses, and purpose over the path that was handed to him. His journey is proof that your past is a chapter, not your identity, and that redemption is possible when you take radical responsibility for your future. Today, I'd love to introduce Chad Dunn. Welcome to the show, man.
Appreciate you having me. Yep, thank you very much.
Pretty cool that you can sit back and listen to some of those things and just look at the phrase radical transformation. Mm-hmm. Before we get into your story a little bit, what does it feel like to know that you kind of have that traditional story that a lot of storytellers talk about, which is rags to riches, young kid, experimental in BMX, in football, in wrestling. You kind of play that game for a while and you're successful at it. You're in exercise science and kinesiology. You're scratching that itch. Then life happens and you had to crawl your way back out of that hole on the other side. That to me is like the coolest story. It's like rags to riches, screw your life up a little bit and still find a way back based on passion, purpose, and drive. When you hear bits of your story told like that, what comes up for you?
Well, the biggest thing, I was never a victim. I was never the victim, and you kind of mentioned that. I take responsibility for everything that I've done and everything that I do. It goes back to two things: is choices. And for now, for me making the right choices and doing the right things, it's very simple for me to have these conversations. And I do get a look back, like what a jackass this guy was. When people talk about this book, there's a period in there for me. I know the period of the book, but I'm like, I'd slap the shit out this guy if I was ever just talking to him. He's a knucklehead. But then again, as the book goes on and the story goes on, I'm going to go over there and pat that guy on the back instead of slapping him and be like, man, you did some of the things, and one of the things that everybody wants to do. They turned their life around. They made the transformation. And here you are today living and doing what you want. So again, it's, everyone says, how was the book? And the book was obviously just my latest thing, but I'm not going to settle on that victory. I've got more victories to go get, and that's one of the things too, is never be satisfied.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Victim mentality is huge in this day and age. Typically, I like to think that if there's incentive, you can then backtrack and predict behavior. Mm-hmm. And I think there is a little bit of incentive around victimhood where people give you empathy. They give you the benefit of the doubt. They soften a little bit. And I don't think that was the case back in the day. When you want to think about like masculinity, it's like back in the day, it was like, stoic, push your feelings down, get the job done. But in modern day, feelings are floating to the surface a little bit. And I'm not somebody that really leans on one side or the other of that. I think there's a time and a place to explore feelings and to acknowledge their existence, but not allow them to define you and then fall into making poor choices based on the victimhood. What are you seeing from modern day men, and how have you helped educate the world based on your story around victimhood?
We deal with trauma. The first questions that people always ask me, they say, well, Chad, how was your childhood? And I had a great childhood. My parents were very good. They're still married. I never had a problem. Again, my dad was a rancher. I came from a country background. So it's hard work. It's hard work. If you fall off the horse, get your ass back up on it, But that's really how I live my life. Nowadays, we as parents, we're trying to keep our kids out of situations that we were in, by learning and by doing. But by doing that, we're also creating weak men. We're creating weak men because we don't want them to do what we did. I've got two boys, and again, my job was to keep them out of trouble. Now, thankfully, and I do say this openly, thankfully, both of my kids got in trouble early because now they understand that you're not excluded from this. It can happen to anybody, even when your dad was in trouble, right? So they got into a little bit of trouble early. They're doing great now. They both are having kids on the way. I got one with a grandson right now. But again, I want my kids to struggle because that's how you're going to get better. If I was to keep them and coddle them, like you said, the empathy stuff, I have a whole thing. And one of my old trainers that was at the 49ers, he says, if you're looking for sympathy, you can find in the dictionary between shit and syphilis, right? I'm not here to give you sympathy, right? We're here to get you better, and it starts with your feelings. And we talk about it. Feelings are good or feelings are bad. It just determines, it's like fire, how you use them. It can either heat your house or it can burn the shit out of you. So how do people use feelings nowadays? And I think that's the biggest thing is that, the society that we're in, it's soft. It is soft. And I hate to say that, but I've seen it when I was incarcerated. I've seen it in the streets. There's a lot when I was, selling drugs and running around through the hood. There's a lot of people that would get jacked just because you knew they were soft and you could take their shit. Again, don't condone it, but that's just, you don't want to leave yourself, susceptible to situations, and I think the biggest thing is that we have to create stronger men.
Yeah, I totally agree. What's that famous quote? Hard times create strong men.
Yep. Strong men create weak. Yep. And I use that all the time. And it's true, so generations.
It's interesting too, because our society right now is conditioned to seek comfort. We had the author, Michael Easter, on the show, the author of The Comfort Crisis. And we talked about that. I mean, we're in these beautiful beds or chairs. We're looking for cushioned shoes, can set the temperature to whatever we want in whatever location or vehicle that we have. You have heated seats. Everything's turning into a massage, chairs and whatnot. And there's a part of that, like you said, with feelings relating to that. When you have comfort available, it can be a tool. But when you're seeking the dopamine hit and the comfort all the time, now it becomes a crutch. Yep. At what point in your life did you kind of make that observation that so much of life is a game, and understanding that things like feelings and things like these comfort-seeking modalities, they're simply tools, and it comes down to the ratio and how you use them in your life? But our world conditions us to think like avoid pain at all costs and seek comfort. But then as a byproduct, we don't learn that much. And by avoiding pain, the learning lessons aren't there, and human beings are not getting sharpened. They're becoming victims. They're becoming the people that just want handouts. They want to be saved. I mean, Mel Robbins talks about it often. The way to change your life is to realize that nobody's coming to save you. Take full ownership and responsibility for the choices that you make. That in and of itself, that little mindset can reshape the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm. And that's what helped me, is I took responsibility of everything. When I was in prison, I was sitting there talking to people and I would listen to people. They were sitting there, I got screwed by the system. Somebody snitched on me or I got set up. But again, that's the victim mentality. I went in there and said, everything I did was my choice. It was my choice to get here. It's going to be my choice to get out of here. And then when I got out, it was my choice to stay out of there. They say 67% of the people, they end up back in prison. That was not going to be me. They also said that people that smoke crack, they don't make it off of there. I was smoking crack back on the streets. I got out of there. So I've been able to do this. I know how to get into trouble, but the best thing too is I know how to get out of trouble. And it all becomes off of choices. I wasn't looking for a program, or I wasn't looking for somebody to comfort me. This was like, Chad, this is on you. When I met my wife, Jackie, that's when I knew that I had a good partner, and she's not soft by any means. Like I said, she's Italian. She's the realest person I met. There's no sign of weakness. There is not one sign of weakness because again, you're a man. I don't want my wife stronger than me. So you have to buckle up. And she told me, she said, I've already got kids. I don't need another one. So you need to change. But that's when, when I met her, I knew that this was my change. This is what it was going to be, because now I have somebody that's going to help me make these right decisions instead of just going on my own whim, knowing I can get in trouble and then get out of it. I was done with it. That was a hard life.
Mm-hmm. Let's backtrack a little bit. Let's better understand your relationship with being an athlete and BMXing. Sure. How'd you ultimately find that, and how was BMXing introduced into your life, and where did that competitive spirit come from?
Obviously, growing up, my dad was played football at Colorado State. My mom was a track person, so she ran in high school and did all the sports, cheerleader. So obviously, sports was going to be in my blood, right? So again, I always talk about too your DNA. Who is your DNA? If your mom and dad are librarians and a musician, you're probably not going to be a good athlete. So we have to choose your parents carefully. And I did. I got lucky. I got two athletic parents. They went down to buy me a bike. As all kids, they want that first bike. So they went down to the local bike shop in Fort Collins, Colorado, brought me a BMX bike. Bought it home. My dad was setting up the buckets with the wooden ramps that you were jumping off. Now this is the 1980s, right? So this is 1980. I'm 51. So it was the thrill of maybe failure. You're going to ride over that jump and eat shit. You know what I mean? But you're going to get back up. If you do get back up, if I didn't get back up, I don't think my mom and dad would have put me in racing. Right? Probably would have put me in gymnastics or something, just a little bit safer. Maybe swimming so you can't fall out of the pool. But I did.
I don't know, man. Gymnastics is pretty dangerous.
Oh, gymnastics is very dangerous. Gymnastics is very dangerous. Yeah. But you get the thrills and spills. I've got 6 or 7 top gymnasts right now that are in the state of Arizona. They're legit. They're legit. Yeah. And nothing on gymnastics. But it was just something that was going to be a little bit less, maybe less the dirt, maybe falling in the dirt and all that stuff, even breaking your arm. But it was just something that I could go out there and race. And it was a cool thing to do. It was a kid's sports. There was parents that were there. We just started racing locally. And then, in 1982, we moved out to Arizona. Again, racing. My sister at the same time, she was racing. Came out to Arizona, and I kind of mentioned the weather was better. So we raced more, and the racing was more competitive. But that's just life. You go somewhere, you might meet new friends, and you're going to have to try to fit into that group, or you're going to have to try to be with them. So out here, I'd had to try to be with the top riders, So I started training more, started riding more. We could race more races just due to the weather. But then I found out the guys in California were even faster than the guys in Arizona. And really, California is where BMX started, But the guy that helped me, the guy with the logo that we have, Eddie King, he was a San Diego guy. Mikey King, they grew up racing bikes in Chula Vista. Sam Willoughby, we got all the guys that are Chula Vista Olympic Training Center. But there was just something that, it was a cool sport. You're with all the kids, you're rolling around in the dirt, just everything that a boy wanted to be. And again, it was fun, but just wasn't. As I got older, 15 years old, I wanted to do different sports in high school because there was no BMX racing in high school. So that's when I got into playing football, and I started playing Pop Warner just because I knew I was making that transition. And it was just, I had a better love for football. I liked hitting people, and I liked cracking some things. And BMX, you can't hit people too much, because you get kicked out, you get disqualified. So I was able to take a little bit more. Again, we always go the agility, mobility, hostility, right? 3 things you have to be a good athlete. So I could take the hostility, I could put that onto the football field. Again, even small stature, but I was still able to do it. And then again, that got into wrestling when I was too small. So it was kind of my whole thing. But sports to me as a young kid, I got done with my senior year. It set my identity, and it set me about preparation, about health, taking care of your body, putting time into train. We talked about it last night, a lot of recovery stuff. I taught you how to recover. But even in the early 90s, we never really worried about recovery. It was, you're working while they're sleeping. The recovery hasn't started until later this year, this decade. So it's been different. It's been different, just to see the transitions with everything with the sports as well. And then again, that got me to ASU. Like I said, I wanted to do exercise science, and that got me to the middle part of my life.
I love that you're sharing this story, man. The recovery word stood out to me because you're right, dude. In the 90s and late 80s, what was recovery? It literally was mind over virtually everything. If I was thirsty, I drank from the hose, and then I was back at it. Like sometimes, like the food was important, yes, but also it was like, I mean, I didn't come from money, so it's a bag of chips here, maybe a hot dog over here, and maybe some macaroni and cheese or something. You're just like getting some fuel in, and then out to go play. And I'm not saying that's the best, but I do think there's this psychological manipulative hierarchy now it's putting too much emphasis, in my opinion, on recovery. You still have to do the thing. You can't just focus on recovery and think that you're going to maximize your human potential. With both of us being wellness guys, and we're the first to emphasize, like, yes, movement, sleep, nutrition, they're all very important. Don't get me wrong. But you still have to have that inner drive. You still have to have the competitive spirit, still have to learn observational learning. You still have to problem solve. You have to get up when you fall down, like you alluded to. Where did that change? When did we start giving all this like value to science this and science that and let's biohack everything? It's like, no, just go put your nose to the grindstone for a little bit. And after doing that, cool. Now we'll integrate recovery techniques. But in my opinion, you almost have to learn that. You don't start with recovery. You start with getting your ass kicked and getting out and being the man in the arena.
Yep. I tell these guys all the time, what do you need to recover for? Because you haven't done shit, you know? And a lot of people want to tell you what they've done, but they haven't accomplished anything, you know, whether it be playing basketball. I need to get some recovery. We had a game yesterday. That's cool, but I watched your game. You sat your ass on the bench the whole time, so I don't even know why you have to recovery. You have to go work today. The ones that started, the ones that were on the court, they get to have recovery today. You know, so again, it's just because we want to keep up with the Joneses. You know, we see somebody getting a Normatex, you know, hey, I want to go get the Normatex. You know, I got to do a cool plunge. That's good for me. You know, it's good for inflammation. Well, you haven't done any activity to get inflamed. You know, you don't have anything in this world. You don't have any of these issues. So again, it goes back about, you know, what is your workload? What is your workload? And some people don't do it. You know, I mean, I've got a kid right now. He's the #1 class of 2027 basketball player in the country. His name's Bruce Branch III. He will be the next NBA guy that I have. I've got 6 in the last 8 years or 9 years that went into the NBA. But this kid's a dog. You know, he was over in Italy this year for the Euro camp that he had. Then he came back and he went over to Donovan Mitchell camp with Adidas. He came out here, went to the Damian Lillard camp. I mean, this kid is always working. And when he's doing that, there's recovery that's going to be needed because you never, ever get a chance to sit down. You know, you have to take that. But these people that don't put in that work, again, I don't see why you have to get recovered. You know, the only thing that I think we still have that's unison is sleep. We've talked about it for 60 years. We still talk about it now. You know, the best thing for recovery is sleep. And one of the biggest tools that people don't utilize is sleep. You know, especially now as you throw the phones in there, you throw social media, you're not going to get these kids to bed. There's no way.
Yeah, that's very well said. It's interesting when you think about, you know, you being an entrepreneur and whatnot. They say that Netflix's biggest competitor is sleep. And I think what's also interesting now, that's probably Instagram's biggest competitor. It's probably TikTok's biggest competitor. Doom scrolling nature is something that is becoming more and more apparent in our lives. And then you think about the posture repercussions that come from that. You think about nutrition. It's not just what you eat, it's what you consume. What are you watching? Who's in your ear? How have you crafted your algorithm? You know, are you just using Instagram as soft porn and just looking at all the pretty girls out there? Or is it an educational tool? Is it something that you can inform yourself? Are you listening to thought leaders? Are you getting innovations based on what you're going through in your life? I mean, there's some great rehab things out there that guide you step by step as to how to help your hip, help your knee, help your shoulder. The podcast clips are all over the place on social media. And like you said, it comes down to the choice. And where I'd like to take the conversation next, Chad, is your thoughts on addiction, because that's something that I think is prevalent in many people's lives. And it's not just addiction to escapism or addiction to drugs or alcohol. Mm-hmm. It's addiction to poor choices. And okay. I've heard you talk on that before, and I want to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah, addiction is a tough word for me. It's a tough word, you know, and I'm glad that you brought that up. You know, obviously with the troubles that I've got into, you know, over my years doing stupid shit, I had to go to a lot of counseling classes. Most of them were court ordered. I never checked myself into rehab. I did everything on my own, right? Even in prison, I had to do classes, NA classes and AA classes. Those were mandatory once you were inside there. But when I got released, I had to go to one class, and this one class was one of this will stick with me forever, and it's the thing that has pushed me to who I am today and what I've built today. I was in there with heroin addicts. I was in there with gambling addicts. I was in there with sex addicts. I was in there with you name it, right? And my counselor, his name was Scott. And he sat down. Mind you, I'm coming straight out of prison. I'm fresh, clean. You know, I got a clear head. I got a clean slate of paper. Some of these other people in the class are living on the streets. They might have been, you know, got jacked up the night before or hustled and had some deal. But he said, here's one thing you're going to hear in this class. You're never going to hear me use the word addiction in this class. Okay. Addiction, if you say the word addiction, that means you're always going to relapse because you're never in control. You're never in control. There's a disease. The disease is doing that for you. Now, I have to be careful because I'm not a psychologist. I know there's chemical imbalances, but this is more off your behavior change. And this is really what I do as a corrective behavior change specialist, is it's all about changing your behavior. I'm not trying to reprogram your mind. I'm changing your behavior, but then you can have repetition with good behavior and you can reprogram your mind, which is your software. He says, I'm not going to say addiction. Y'all are in here because you make bad choices. And that stuck with me. I'm like, fuck, this is easy. It's choices. Everybody told me before I was an alcoholic, I was a drug addict, or all these things. That's not true. The labels that society puts on you are not true. What you choose to do and put the label on yourself, that is what's most important. And that's what matters the most. I left that meeting and I told my wife, I said, Jackie, man, I said, this is going to be easy, man. This is yes or no. This is yes or no. It's so simple. Chad, if you don't want to drink, don't go to the bar. Easy. Chad, if you don't want to drink, don't stop and pick up any beers. Easy. Don't go to the hood. Don't go and buy crack and don't go looking for it. This was very easy. And at that point in time, that's when it became choices. And that's the foundation for everything that I do daily is it's choices. Again, I don't know anybody, and I say this all the time, I don't know anybody that's addicted to running in front of cars. I don't know anybody that's addicted to putting their hand on a hot stove, because there's a choice and there's a consequence. We know the consequences of running in front of cars. We know the choices or the consequences of putting your hand on a hot stove. But even for people such as, I'm willing to take a chance every once in a while, whether it be doing illegal activity or using drugs and alcohol, whatever it is, they're willing to take that chance, understanding that there's a bad consequence behind it all. And it is, everything goes off in consequences. So what I've done when I got out the last 17 years is I've made the correct choice every day, and that's part of my program is it's a one step, one in a row every day for 365 days. That's my program. Choices.
Beautiful. It's beautifully said. To challenge that a little bit though, I think there's a formative component to your headspace there where you believe you have the power to make the choice. Which is what I personally align with as well. I love to make jokes sometimes, like allergies are a mindset, or fatigue is a mindset, or cold is a mindset. Maybe not. Sure. I joke with my wife about that type of stuff all the time. But what comes to mind there is the respect and the hierarchy that we place on people with credentials and credentialism. And what I see oftentimes, especially in the pediatric space, is young child not getting attention from mom and dad, on the iPad, addicted to Cocoa Melon or something like that. They're getting dopamine. Then there's a tantrum when the iPad's taken away. Then they go to school and they can't focus. They're not interested in movement anymore. Now they're diagnosed with ADHD. Right? And so there's a credentialism. The parents are trying their best to navigate the child. They're trying to keep the child alive. They're trying to keep them safe. They probably can't afford a babysitter in modern day because that's equivalent of a mortgage, if not more. So they use the iPad as a tool. Well, now, like you said, the behavior, they're not playing in dirt anymore. I mean, I drive through neighborhoods, and as a kid, we were riding bikes, we were playing capture the flag, we were playing football. I didn't have a pair of shoes that wasn't scuffed up or a pair of pants that didn't have holes in it. We were hopping fences. You're playing around with leaves and dirt and touching everything. You're drinking from the hose. Modern day, it's like, oh, it's not safe. You can't be outside all the time. We're going to keep you confined to the yard. Social connections are basically just at school or church, or they have to be pre-planned. It wasn't navigating, meeting strangers in the street like it was back in the day. And the point that I'm making there on my mini rant here is I'm all for education. I'm all for continuing to learn, but we place doctors on a pedestal and they're receiving education from pharmaceuticals, from big pharma. And then they're diagnosing kids and diagnosing people with, ADD, ADHD, you're depressed, you have a chemical imbalance. Here, according to this research and your answers to this questionnaire, you're this. And like you said, the labels. Well, that now lives rent-free in the headspace of somebody. And it's labeling somebody, oh, you're autistic or this, that, and the other. It's like, okay, maybe that's caused from vaccines. Maybe it's not. I wouldn't say I'm an anti-vaxxer, but I do have to point towards the fact that it's a possibility and you have to consider that variable. And so what are your thoughts on the formative component of the headspace being malleable and agile enough to believe, you know what, I can change my life by simply making better choices. But that's tough to deconstruct when a doctor said, you are this. And then it's re-established by the parents wanting to keep their kids safe with positive intent. But now you're stuck in this mucky storm. Yep. And it forms your mind. I mean, that's a formative time for young kids.
It's crucial. It's crucial. Yep. Well, kids learn through imitation. And that's what happens, as we were young kids and young adolescents, we learn to our peers and we learn to our parents. And so everything that we do get, if you see mom and dad come home from work and they flip on the TV, they don't even want to take the kids outside anymore, right? Because they're overworked or they have to work harder. So they don't want to have playtime with the kids. I mean, my dad is out back throwing the ball with me or even with me and my kids. You're throwing the ball, you're at the basketball court. I have a female basketball team that came down here and we had a little break from practice for the week. And the coach called me and he says, Chad, just let them have fun today. Let them have fun. So I've got some basketball hoops out back. And I said, well, let's go do this. We got 9 people. Let's go play 3-on-3-on-3 out back. And we'll just have a nice little time, have fun. Out of the 9 girls, only 2 girls have ever played basketball outside. Everything else has been structured inside a gym or facility. It's like, that's crazy. You learn from being outside. When we talk about ADHD, I look at my kid because he was diagnosed with ADHD when he was younger. And I say it's crazy because if you put him on a phone, the teacher calls up. He can't sit down in class. He's up and down. He's moving around. And that's what we hear is a big common complaint with these teachers. But then you give him a phone and he's sitting there all day long in his bed for about 2 hours. Right? They're not moving. So I always say, how does he have ADHD when he can give him a phone and they can sit there for 2 hours, right? Again, yes, I understand their brain is stimulated and they're having these changes quickly, and everything's at the end of the fingers. But again, make them do something productive, have them do something productive. But again, I think the parents, they don't put the time into the kids, they don't want to do that. And this is a crucial time that we're raising these kids. I see it when the patients come in here, mom and dad are over here getting treatment. The kids have to sit in the chairs and they give them the iPad. I go over and grab the kids. I say, come over here. Let me work with you for a little bit. So I get them and I have them start doing some exercise. Just because I want them to see what it's about to be fit, and I want to just set a tempo with them early. Hopefully they can learn, like, hey, I remember that one guy when my mom was getting therapy that told me to exercise. It's not just about sitting behind an iPad, and that's one of the problems. It's simple for the parents to do that because it's an easy way to quiet the kid down. Unfortunately, you're not doing anything for them in the future.
And what's so interesting, Chad, is the phrase conform and comply. Sitting for 8 hours a day in an uncomfortable chair is not in alignment with our biology. We're meant to move. We're meant to hunt. We're meant to gather. We're meant to wrestle. We're meant to play. We're meant to hinge. We're meant to squat. We're meant to push. We're meant to pull. We're meant to carry things, move at a slow pace often, right? Step accumulations become a huge thing in modern society. I wonder why. Yep. We've been talking about this since, primal living way back before the advent of agriculture and all these man-made constructs. But what's so interesting is you're forcing people to comply and sit underneath artificial light in these uncomfortable chairs, stay quiet, stay in hip flexion, rounded shoulders, forward head tilt. And then when a kid wants to get up and move because he's intuitively listening to his biology, now they're labeled, oh, you're a problem. I'm going to talk to your parents and I'm going to use fear to get you to comply, rather than my mom did this beautiful thing that she knew that I wanted to play. So she would say, hey, Bryce, let's sit down for 10, 15 minutes. Let's work on reading this thing or answering these questions or doing some mathematical equations. If you perform well and you show focus over here, I'll go outside and shoot the ball with you, or we'll play catch, or we'll kick the soccer ball back and forth, or I'll hang out with you in the sun while you ride your bike or your scooter. Now it created this incentive model. And because she was willing to play with me, I was willing to learn. Then learning to me became fun. Why can't that be a version of teaching? Why can't that be a version of the curriculum where teachers have the agency to read the room, feel the energy from the kids that they're teaching, and then be able to get creative and innovative with their teaching style. Because I don't agree with it all being the same. People are not all the same. And being able to have that adaptability, I think, will upgrade the operating system of the children. And now it's not going to soften their ability to have color in their life. And what I mean by that, like, they're not going to dull their song with fear that they're going to get in trouble. Because at the end of the day, we're tribal beings. If you get in trouble, now you're ostracized from the tribe. Now you're in isolation. Now you're in trouble. Now you're labeled. Now you're pushed over here. That's equivalent to like real pain.
It is. It is. But the number one thing for the human body and for the human itself, the first thing that we want is we want to be accepted.
Yeah.
Everything goes about being accepted, like you said, from the tribe and anything. And this goes way, way, way back, is that I have to be accepted. And so when we start getting somebody, or we start putting labels on them, or we don't fit in that group or whatever it was, now, like you said, it becomes a detriment. I think with the schooling, it's different too, because it's all traditional. It hasn't changed. The society's changed so much. You can sit in a class because they're going to go have recess. I could drive by a school at lunchtime now. These kids are having recess. They all sitting down still. So I don't even know if recess is even a thing for these kids. We have to get back into activity, because one of the steps of, when you talk about the trans-theoretical model of behavior, one of the steps is action. You have to have action, and sitting down is not action. They might think it is because your brain's doing something, but physically, you and I, we both know this, is that physical action is the best thing that you have to have. It's healthy for you. It goes a long ways. But we're in a society right now where there is no action. After the action phase, now you have maintenance. Well, if you're not moving, what is there to maintain? And so again, we're altering the behavior of a lot of these kids just by taking away the action from them. And I think that's the problem, is that we have to be able to get into a society, or add some type of curriculum where we can back, even the government stuff, the presidential awards and all that, they don't even have it no more. I know now we're starting to put that back out there. But there's not even, we don't have anything for these kids. What are the incentives for the kids to be active? That's the big thing. Besides money, we know that now with the professional sports, NIL.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other rabbit hole that we can dive down shortly. Huge. I'm a big fan of what RFK Jr. is doing.
Sure,
I don't necessarily agree with all of the policies of any politician, but I do have to acknowledge that somebody in his 70s is leading by example. I mean, we saw that video of him doing strict pull-ups and push-ups in his 70s. Pretty freaking cool to me. And for anybody, that pushes back against that, it's like, sure, you can be upset with him about his policy or his take on things, but you have to acknowledge that movement is medicine. And by doing it, you're not only going to get hormonal changes, but you're going to add muscle mass, increase bone density, create camaraderie. There's going to be optimizing breathing. Your heart's going to be beating at a better pace. You're going to be connecting with nature. I think that's pretty freaking cool. And I think it's rad that they're bringing back the presidential fitness.
I love it.
Component. So that way people are working on hanging from a pull-up bar, working on chin-ups, working on optimizing their push-up mechanics, working on the mile run, making time for what I believe is non-negotiable. Because for a long time there, we flipped the script. It was inversely, in my opinion, wrong, which is using your health to pursue wealth and then later trying to use the wealth to regain our health. Mm-hmm. And it's usually too late. It needs to take action, like you said initially, and then there needs to be maintenance. If you never take action, or if you're just kind of making it to your pillow at night to try to win capitalism, you're going to lose long-term, and you're going to be, your skills are not going to be as sharp, because your brain's not going to get that activity or that human version of a dog park. Yep. So I love that you touched on the presidential stuff and seeing physical education become a little bit more of a priority in our schooling.
Well, and that goes back into, even when we go into sports, we talk, and it's not just sports, I'll talk about it in life, is that anybody that's going to succeed, they have to have a high motor. You have to have a high motor, And recently, I've been talking, and I always use the definition of motor is you have to have dog times conditioning, right? That equals motor. A dog that's not conditioned is just going to lay down, right? That's a cute dog, right? a conditioned dog that's running up and down the fence that's not going to bark or bite or nothing, okay, I'm not afraid of that either. I'll go pet the dog. But you have to have a little bit of dog in you. And I think what we've done over this generational changes is that we've taken the dog out of our kids. When it gets hard, people shut down. They don't want to push themselves to that extra level or to the boundaries. There's a lot of things that we can do to establish toughness mentally and physically. But again, they don't want to take the action. They don't want to become the dog. That's where we use our cryotherapy, and I kind of go into the different resources there. It's cold in there. We have the full body chamber from head to toe. It's negative 121 degrees. I'm going to put you in there for 6 minutes. Well, I can't do that. It's too cold. You don't have no dog in you, right? If you can last in there for 6 minutes, now we're developing the dog, and I'm putting you in a stressful situation. And then I know you can get out of it. Again, and moms and dads and coaches, we're not trying to put them in stressful situations. And so that's really what I use a lot of our cryotherapy for right now is these kids. It's more mental to let them know that you can survive any harsh conditions.
The Trident family taught me something really important this last year, that we are all a bundle of stories, both good, bad, and everything in between. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. I start my day with the Sweet Cream Cold Brew as I am prepping my mind and body for fitness, service, coaching, and podcasting. With various locations in San Diego, they offer over 14 nitro cold brews and a variety of specialty drinks. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from the Keto Bakery. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code ALLSMITH to take your coffee experience to the next level.
I love that you touched on that. We do the same thing with the cold plunge.
Yep.
It's scary, right? You get in, you get that huge norepinephrine response. Your heart starts to beat really fast. And in that moment, most people, they mouth breathe. They get punched in the face with anxiety, and then fight or flight sets in. They want to get out. Yep. But what's really cool is that you actually don't have to do anything except breathe. You have to be with your pain and be with the discomfort. And then on the other side, you're not only so proud of yourself, but you took control of your breath. You realize that we breathe roughly 20,000 times in a day. And when someone cuts us off in traffic, we get that stressful email, we get injured, we're in a fight with a coworker, whatever the thing is that's triggering, we can always come back to our breath. We can come back to the tools that are free. We don't have to rely on an anxiety pill. We don't have to take the external and allow it to control our internal. And something about that is very cool. And the other thing that's interesting that comes up, Chad, is the most successful people are comfortable having uncomfortable conversations. Those uncomfortable conversations start in the playground, in my opinion, which is, Chad, you stepped on the line. You were out of bounds. You're like, no, I wasn't. And I'm like, okay, fine, let's shoot on it. Or, you end up fighting about it. You have to problem solve. One person needs to compromise. One person is probably trying to over negotiate. But in that moment, you're learning at a young age, you're learning interacting, interpersonal relations, you're learning problem solving, you're learning compromise, you're learning tone, you're observing body language, you're learning sales, you're learning negotiating. There's so much to be learned on the field, and that's the practical application of what's being taught in the classroom. But the ratio is way off. You're in the classroom 7 to 8 times more than you are out in the yard.
Research, yeah.
And I think that ratio can be shifted a little bit, and there can be a little bit more structure integrating what's learned in the classroom into life and into the field of play.
Well, and like coaches now, and even trainers or teachers, we have tutors. Obviously, we had Cliff Notes back in the day, right? So you had to read your Cliff Notes. We didn't have a tutor, and then the tutor started to come along.
My buddy said that the other day. He goes, Spark Notes and Cliff Notes were the old school version of ChatGPT. I was like, that's so awesome.
Yeah, that's what we did. Yeah, we're talking about it. We had an AI podcast I did the other day about AI stuff, and that was our teaching. That was everything that we did was Cliff Notes. But these kids now, they've got a strength coach, they've got tutoring for, they got a coach or whatever, a musical coach, they got a tie your shoe coach, I got a yoga coach. They have a coach for everything. These kids are very, very, very skilled, very talented. Even the non-athletes, you just talk to the way a lot of these kids are growing up. But there's one thing when you have all of these coaches, there's one thing that diminishes, and that's the ability to think. because the coaches are doing the thinking for you. And that's what I see is the big problem right now that, and again, I always go back to choices. These kids now are not making the right choices because they don't even know how to make a choice because somebody else has done it for me. Their mom, their dad, their coaches. I asked my kids here, if the head coach was not able to show up for basketball practice today, could you run a full practice? You're the leader of the team. You're the captain of the team. This is your team. You get pissed off if you ever get sat out. So-and-so shouldn't be playing over me. You're the leader of the team. If the coach is there, can you not? Can you lead a practice? And a lot of these times, these kids, 99% of them say, no, I can't do it because they don't think about it. They don't think about it. They just watch everything, And again, I think the biggest thing in the society right now is people don't think. People don't think. And that's where we get in this trouble.
Yeah, critical thinking is something that's a little bit of a lost art, sadly.
It's done. Yeah, it's done.
And I like what you said around taking ownership and responsibility because it's easy for young kids to complain like, oh, my friends' practices are like this and mine are like that. And, if it was my team, I would do it this way. Like it's easy to bitch and moan and complain and, throw in your 2 cents. But then it's like, okay, fine. If I gave you the keys to the car, would you be able to drive?
Can't.
And now all of a sudden most people soften. And it's like, hey, if you're going to acknowledge the things that you're frustrated about, fine, totally fair. Feedback is phenomenal. But you also have to acknowledge the good. You have to acknowledge the structure. You have to acknowledge the breakdown of big skills or big complex challenges within the sport and into bite-sized pieces to then have that compounding interest that builds over the course of time. And it is an art to coach. It is an art to create buy-in. But I think if you're operating as a young person in sport, as if you're the owner or as if you're the leader, that's different than just simply being a follower.
Correct. Yep. But that's the problem that there's not a lot of leaders. There's not a lot of leaders because we're not developing them. We're not putting them in tough situations. You're going to learn by failure. You're going to learn by failure. But when somebody fails, it's like, well, that's okay. You'll get it next time. But you got to sit there. You have to feel those emotions. You have to feel what it's like, that pain of losing. I've got guys that are coming back from paralysis. Eddie King, the BMX guy that we talked about, he broke his back up in Big Bear, broke T11, T12, woke up in the dirt and was paralyzed. So I got to reach out to him. I reached out to him. I got a chance to work with him. That's how Move came around. But when he came in, he's the doctor says, you have a spinal cord injury. He said, am I ever going to be able to walk again? They said, well, we don't know. The spinal cord is one of the only injuries that we cannot cure right now. So it's a possibility. And Eddie looked at him and says, you don't know who the fuck you're talking to. He says, I will walk again. And sure enough, he's walking. Right. But
Dang,
again, that's because
cool.
That's because it's personal belief, and on the back of his shirt, when he came in, there was a word. It said believe, and I don't think these kids believe anymore. You talked about putting them in the different surroundings of the different kids and learning styles. When Eddie was in here working on his coming back from his paralysis, I had one of my burn patients. He was on fire for 2.5 minutes. He got 62% burn of his body. Right. So he comes walking through the door, arms are charred, legs are charred. And I see Eddie look at him. I'm like, Eddie, you don't have those scars. He's like, yeah, but at least he can walk. Right. And so, again, that puts everything relative in there. And then, like I said, I had one more. He was a gunshot victim. So I had a paralyzed guy, a burned guy, and a gunshot victim all working out at the same time. Even I have it here. I've got a lot of burned people. Everything is relative. When you're sitting there feeling sorry for yourself, somebody else is going through something worse or just as bad. One of my Olympic swimmers this year, he was in Olympic trials. He has epilepsy. We've talked about it. Could be from some of the shots from early, the immunization stuff. He doesn't know. Has epilepsy. Pool, has a seizure in the pool. Went to the Olympic trials. Everything was good. Went to the University of Cal on a scholarship to go swimming. And he had the geobasal cancer in his neck. Right. So normally it's in the brain, but his came into the neck. So he had to enroll from school. Had to go through chemo. I think he did 18 rounds of chemo and 31 rounds of radiation. But never once did he come down here bitching. How you feeling today? I feel great. And that was a mindset because he's already tested himself. He's an Olympic trial athlete. He's going for it all. Nothing can stop me. And cancer was just another obstacle for him. He recently tore his ACL on a big wheel, and so now he's doing an ACL rehab. But again, this is, when life faces, throws you storms at you, you got to face it. You got to go right into it all. But that's because it teaches you how to think and how to survive, and I think the biggest thing that we do anymore, it's about how do we survive in this world. That's the huge thing that I talk about.
Psychologically, if somebody is diagnosed with paralysis, let's just say that doctor said, instead of "I don't know" around him walking again, what if the doctor said, "No, it's not possible"? What are your thoughts, or what are the techniques you use in rehab? Because you get them in a certain portal where they come in and they might have optimism. They might be completely shut down. That's case dependent on the individual. But what's that original conversation like with you and your team to unlock childlike optimism, knowing that anything is possible if you truly believe it, and really manifesting that healing throughout the body so they can get back to doing the things that they love?
Well, you just said right there, it all stops with optimistic. There's two ways of looking at everything. And we always hear the old cliche, the glass is half empty or the glass is half full. My chapter 4 that I have in my book, it's based on optimism, because that's how I am. I can overcome anything. I might not know, but I'm going to learn it and I'll be able to get through it all. Whether it be criminal activity, the drug use, going to prison, there's certain things that I have gotten over. And again, they haven't stopped me because I've remained optimistic through every situation that I was in. So when people ask me, is the glass empty? Is the glass half empty or half full? I say the glass is overflowing, because there's overflowing of opportunities, but you just have to want to capitalize on them. So when Eddie and my people come in here, the first thing I ask him is that, are you ready to make this comeback? Are you ready to do this? If there's a hesitation, I've got to start working more on the mental side of it all. If they say from the get-go, hey, let's go, let's hit this, I know we're ready to go. And at that time, it's about regaining your own sense of independency. That's what it is. Because whenever you have these these injuries or whatever, you have to rely on somebody else to drive you, to help you put your shoes on. Even if your burns on the arms, you can't reach down to tie your shoes. You have to have somebody help you do that. And again, as we are each individual classic people, it's about what can we do to gain our individualism. We have to become independent, right? Driving there. And so are they willing to do that? Or are they relying on somebody else to do it for them? We see a lot of those people in this world nowadays that they don't want to take responsibility. But the people that we have down here, the people that I work with, it's about pushing them to become the best version of themselves. So that way they are responsible for every choice and every action that they make. Mm-hmm. Failure's on you.
What does that look like when somebody's not ready? When somebody is kind of, it's easy to speak on a podcast and say, hey, we're trying to become the best version of ourselves. We're going to push them. We're going to do X, Y, and Z protocols. But really, you get people that come in and they're really not ready. Oftentimes they show up at physical therapy just trying to reap benefits from car accidents. They don't really care about putting in the work. They want to lay there and get stem or ultrasound or some sort of heat. They want massage, maybe a little bit of cupping. And they're thinking they can just passively lay there and get all the results. And in some cases, it might provide some pain relief. It might, help a little bit. But where does that conversation start for you when somebody comes in after a traumatic accident and they don't really want to get better and they kind of just dump it on you?
And that's where MOVE comes from, right? So obviously being in the physical therapy world for the last 30 years, I've seen the changes of the industry, I've seen the insurance reimbursements come down. I see the doctors, that do surgeries now or that don't do surgeries. I've seen it change throughout it all. And the biggest thing that we have at MOVE is that when we open this up, I didn't have physical therapy at first. I got deterred, obviously, through my criminal activity and behavior I did. I never went to PT school. I was working for a physical therapy place. When I was working with Eddie, my paralyzed guy, my owner, who was a therapist, he said, Chad, you know more about this shit than I do. So why don't you just take over Eddie and work with him? And at that point in time, I had a vision in my head is that I'm going to open up a clinic where people are going to want to come there to get better, not just to come in there to get comfort, right? It's like you talked about. If somebody can go in there and get cupping and stem, lay on the heat pads, that's all feel good stuff. It's going to make you feel good, but it's not going to make you good. Making you good is the work that you have to put in. So when I opened up MOVE, this is where the business side comes in, the brain thinking, thinking outside the box, is that I'm the Uber to physical therapy. So I opened up MOVE. I let everybody know that I'm not a physical therapist. I don't have a license, but I have all my certifications for corrective exercise, sports performance, everything's through the NASM. So I have certifications, but I'm not a licensed therapist, right? And they said, it doesn't matter. I know you can get me better. And so I was known as the person that if you wanted to get better, you're going to go to Move. If you walk in Move and I ask you how you doing today and you say you're tired, I make you turn your ass around and walk out the back door, take a big deep breath, walk in, and I'm going to ask you again, how you doing? Right? Until you say that you're doing good and you're ready to work, you're going to keep walking out that door. So when people come in to Move, our environment and our vibe is that everybody, 99% of the people that are here to get better. We're not your normal physical therapy clinic because I'm not based on numbers, right? I'm not here just to see 40 patients a day and to flip and burn and just make this like McDonald's. We come in here. I've got a staff now that we have 2 physical therapists on staff. I've got a PTA. I have another trainer that works with me. And so we all work together as a team, but we're going to push you to make sure that you get those goals. As you said, there are people that don't want to get better. They'll last for a little while and then they'll come back. They'll get discharged, then they get hurt again and they'll come back. So those are revenue generating cases, which I don't like those because I don't want you to keep coming back. I want you to get healthy. That's what we do as health. I got to get you stronger. I have to get your body in balance. You should not be getting hurt. But at the same time, some people just get hurt because they want to come here and they don't want to compete. Right? Maybe you're going to be the 6th or 7th or 8th man. So, and we talked about this, instead of getting exposed for not putting in the work, it's easier to say that I'm always hurt. And some people live like that. I cannot do it. That's not me. Nope, I'm never going to show a sign of weakness.
Yeah, we've seen that before too, for sure.
It's crazy.
From a business standpoint, you mentioned that that's revenue generating, right? And that's not an easy thing to talk about, right? Like you still are a business. I'm sure there's challenges with a physical therapy facility's relationship with insurance. Mm-hmm. But a healthy patient is not a paying patient. And that's where you get into the conversation around healthcare versus sick care and it being for profit. It's challenging. I mean, you look at Pfizer and cancer research. How many billions or trillions of dollars has gone into cancer research where there's not one cure?
Yep. And spinal cord, same thing.
I don't think that's on. I don't think that's on accident.
No.
And I say that very firmly. Like that is a $1 trillion industry that is designed to keep you in the system. Mm-hmm. But then you have people like us that are thinking outside the box, challenging that and really trying to help people get better. But that's not as profitable. Correct. So now you're stuck in, I'm trying to run a business, but I'm trying to do the right thing and actually get people better. But the moment they get better, they don't come back. Mm-hmm. How do you navigate that as a business owner? And what is the critical thinking inside your headspace? Because obviously it's not professional and it's unethical to not have somebody in pursuit of getting better. That's part of your mission.
Mm-hmm. But it's Move Human Performance Center. It doesn't say anything about training. It doesn't say anything about sports. It says human performance. And so that can be anybody. And what we're doing is we're taking you from the physical side, we're taking you from the emotional side, we're taking you from the mental side, and we're going to bridge those gaps. And that's kind of what my book was, is that was another tool that could help you bridge those gaps. This is not just a therapy clinic that we have. We do sports training, we do fitness training, we have cryotherapy. So I was able to bring in ancillary services that can provide more revenue instead of just having to rely on physical therapy with the insurance benefits. When I got into this, I think the reimbursement was $240 a session. Now, this is in 1996, 1997. Insurances were reimbursing about $240 a session for physical therapy. That's why we have a lot of people going into therapy career. That's why you can have a local mom and pop shop physical therapy place on the corner. They could see 10 people a day or, 11-hour day, 12-hour day with a lunch. They could see 11 patients and they could make some pretty good money. Right now, it's down to $65 a session. We don't even take United Healthcare because they don't pay. It costs me more money to pay my therapist than what they're going to reimburse, which is just unbelievable how they do that. So we don't even take United Insurances here. I know a lot of California has gone to cash pay because the insurances have been so different with Kaisers and everything else that they use. And then that we don't approve this. I've got, my paralysis people that I have, I had one girl that was here and she broke her back in a car wreck and she was a field goal kicker. We were working with her, and her insurance cut her off after like 20 sessions and say, okay, she's done. She's got long-term care now. Like, this is unbelievable. So they don't want to pay for the services. And so we got to figure out a way how you can get around them all. And again, it's not by just treating people. It's not by treating people, because that's not what we're here for. We're here to get you better and to perform better in life. And it's because we care, and I think a lot of this thing is, are you chasing money, or are you chasing whatever your goal is, and our goal here is to be able to help every person. And I told it from day one when we opened up Move, we're here for the people. We're not here for the money.
Yeah. I like that, and I agree, but I also think you've got bills to pay, man. And if you're worried about how to keep the lights on, how to pay your therapists, you're not thinking about that patient. Now your headspace is cluttered. You're in a fight or flight response. You're fearful of, man, am I going to be able to keep this business going? And it's not 100% focused on patient care. And I think, I really want to understand your headspace around insurance models. I mean, I'm listening to Brigham Bueller and his ways to well. And at the end of the day, with these insurance companies, like, everybody wants to sweep that conversation under the rug. How do you go from $240 of reimbursement, which is a pretty appropriate hourly pay for a physical therapist that has all kinds of knowledge, PT8 hours, the nuts and bolts of exams and the pressures associated with practical exams, physical exams. I mean, you're paying that money for any other doctor that's prescribing. The only difference is most physical therapists are not prescribing medications. So because that's not a part of the revenue stream, now insurance companies are like, oh, it's not that profitable, so it doesn't make sense for us to contribute as much in this field as it does in this field. Mm-hmm. But you're literally creating a system that's not to get people better. So it's not healthcare. So what's the incentive to have fucking insurance?
All day long. Yep, all day long. And we see that. When people come in here, I know a lot of clinics in Arizona right now, they're charging you a $30 upfront fee. Just if you have somebody that's from United or that's Humana, that's out of network, because they know they're not going to get that. Now, mind you, you might also have a copay, right? But for those insurances, they're charging you cash up front. So they're trying to do a hybrid where I'll get the $47 reimbursement from United, but I've also collected $60 on the front end from your copay. And then obviously, since you're a United patient, I charge you $30 extra. But they're doing that so that they can come out with that $100 to where they could probably just break even, I see personal trainers charge more money than the insurances pay for a therapy session, which is asinine, because they got a doctorate degree. They're valuable, their knowledge and their licensing. Their licensing is more important than a certification. But you got trainers that are out here charging $120 a session or an hour, and the therapists, they're working on these people for whatever, 45, it could be an hour if they're doing one-on-one, and they get $65. It's ridiculous. So somehow that has to change for physical therapy, and it's nationwide. Chiropractors can bill for a whole lot of different shit that physical therapy can't. And that's where they make their money. When they come in, they'll bill you for the x-rays and different things that they do. And insurances will pay to get their money back. They're not going to pay for just your exam. They're not going to do that.
Yeah. And I think it goes to show, taking a step away from insurance for a second, it really comes down to how you market, how you sell, the reputation you develop, the word of mouth that spreads within your community. Because like you're not a physical therapist, but you know that you can help heal people. So like the credentials, yes, they're important. Yes, they should be a variable that's taken into consideration. But what's so fascinating to me, Chad, is we go to school for exercise science, exercise physiology, thinking like, oh, we have the X's and O's as to how to apply this to the right patient. Little do you know that that's the privilege. That's the fun stuff. What's not fun is, oh, I have to have liability insurance. I have to understand how to market, how to sell. Now I need to understand how to be a social media influencer. Now I have to understand algorithms. Now I have to have extra cash flow for ad spend so that it gets inside other people's algorithms, because otherwise nobody's going to see it. Door-to-door sales is kind of gone. Lead generation now becomes a big part of preventative medicine or rehabilitation medicine. Mm-hmm. Versus the other side, lead generation's not that hard because you're forced to have health insurance And based on fear, any little thing, you're like, oh, I need to go to my primary care physician. I need to go get this checked out. I need the blood work. And that's like highlighted in bold, underlined with 20 exclamation points of importance. But the other stuff's not as important, or at least that's the narrative that's being painted.
Yep. Well, it goes back into corporations too, because we got Banner out here, we have Dignity, so we have all these corporations that are going back in and buying the hospitals, right? Doctors back in the day, I'll go back to the early 2000s, they left the hospitals and they opened up their own surgical centers because they could collect more money. They got better the reimbursements that were out there. They could get paid for the surgical centers, and I didn't have to take my cut and give it to the hospitals. But just like you said, I got to hire a front desk. I have to have somebody do billing. I have to have different insurances. I have to carry X, Y, and Z. And then that became so prevalent. The insurances were cutting the reimbursements on their surgeries. And so here's these doctors that have these standalone facilities. They're on their own. But now it's work. I've got to work 12-hour days. I've got 14-hour days. I have to manage the staff. I don't have my life anymore. So here, I want to say it's probably about 2019 or so, all the doctors started going back to work for the hospitals. They went back to Banner. They went back to all the big hospitals because now they just got to show up, do their job, and then they can leave because they're not getting paid to do anything. The special treatments that they would do, the patient care, you're not getting paid for that. So now you're just over here and now you just become somebody that's practicing medicine instead of doing it for a reason. And I think there's a lot of people that just practice medicine, which we all know as practitioners of. That's true. But again, if you have the patient care and you want to get the people better, there's a lot of people that love. We were talking to a doctor this week. He's one of our big referral sources. We're a big word of mouth. Everything that we do is word of mouth. That's our number one marketing aspect. And we have it that way because remember, I opened in 2017. In 2020, COVID hit. That's not good for a small business owner, especially with therapy and fitness when COVID's shutting down the world. But we were essential business, and so we were able to stay open. Good thing because a lot of the colleges and more of these athletes were around the country. I got athletes that were sent to me from Maryland, from Oregon, from TCU, because we had to continue that chain of the medical care. And that's what it was about. It's not just about practicing medicine. We're here to help you become that better person. But again, everything from the corporations to the insurance companies to big pharma, they're regulating everything. It's hard for us as a small business to survive in this, but that's where the business plans come, There's plenty of ways to live when you're incarcerated. You just have to have a job. You have to think about things. You got to be correct. I see people that they made money just by ironing the clothes, and they were a clothes guy, so you'd have to go wait in the laundry room. Even when I was in prison, I was doing training. I was training people so I could earn money in their training just by training people. Again, it's about being creative, and I think that's one of the biggest things is being a small business owner is you have to be creative, but at the same time, the private sector can always win. Because I can change. I'm fluid on what I have to do. My business plan can change daily if I need it to be, whereas a corporation or something like that, we got to look for next quarter and we got to go on from there. So again, it's just being able to be fluid, like your self-identity. It's got to be fluid in your business plan the same way.
I liked what you talked about with hustle culture. That's something that you see time and time again with people that sell drugs, maybe get involved in something that they shouldn't get involved in. I mean, we're seeing it now with the gambling situation in the NBA.
Huge.
And it's so interesting, man. Like people that end up breaking the law, they're so damn smart. They're so innovative. They understand, how to go over, under, and around to try to make things work. And yes, they need to take accountability for their behavior and there should be a consequence. But I'm also very interested as to like what goes on in their mind and how they navigate that. So for you, man, navigating the challenge from BMX, then you got into traditional sports in high school with football and wrestling.
Yep.
You wanted to beat people up a little bit per your father's communication with you. What happened as you entered the real world after high school that led you down a dark path?
I going to ASU. I started school and I started learning. Everyone's going to college to party. ASU is one of the top 5 party schools in the nation. Again, being a BMX rider, I love entertainment, and everything in my life is entertainment. I love entertainment, and so going out to the nightclubs, getting the fake ID, drinking and doing all the stupid shit you can do. Again, the entrepreneurial mindset. I saw people doing cocaine in Scottsdale. I saw people partying. I saw people doing all that. I had connections in the South Side where I could go get that. Never once I thought I'd be selling cocaine, But I could go over there, I could buy it, double my profits, make some money, have fun, be known as the guy, have a little bit of status behind you. And this was pretty cool. It was kind of like you were a CEO. You know, people loved you. They smiled when they saw you coming, which is what I have now. People, when they walk in my door, they see me, they smile when I'm here. You know, all right, cool, Chad's here. You know, I mean, because they know they're going to get some of my energy. They know I'm going to take care of them. They know I'm going to work the hardest. And I was the hardest working drug dealer that was out there, right? I was open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's that entrepreneurial mindset. How are you going to be able to do this? Uh, you know, there's obviously a supply and demand, and that's what comes with physical therapy. That comes with anything that we have in life. And so I was able to find the demands. I have always been able to find the demand. This is the demand of this new model for physical therapy. You know, I had the demand of taking the dope from Southside and taking it up to Scottsdale. Never once did I thought I'd be using drugs, right? Because again, my body, I've always been in health. I've been in fitness, you know. Obviously drinking is just that, you know, but I never thought I'd be doing drugs. Next thing you know, I was with these girls one night and we were at a party and they said, well, you know, can you get me some crack? I'm like, here's some coke. She goes, I don't want to do any coke. That's different. I said, no, it's not different. It's the same stuff. It's just rock form. They took a couple of hits of it. Next thing you know, I took a couple of hits of it and I became a crackhead, right? I was smoking crack. I was doing different things. I was going to play football games. I would smoke crack before we had a full contact men's league that was out here. I would smoke crack before I went to go do the football games. I was a spin instructor, Johnny G, you know, Frogs over in Ensenada. You know, I was one of the first spin instructors out here in Arizona to get the certification to do spin classes. I was smoking crack before I went to go do my spin classes, right? Again, energy. And so getting into that was my dark days. The problem was at that point in time, I got so far into it, I didn't even know how to get the hell out of it, right? So I took a break from the physical therapy in the sports performance world. My mom and dad, they took me in. It's kind of like a rehab where I had to do crafts. I've always done crafts, and that's a good artsy thing for my brain to slow it down and to get me to focus on things. So I was rescued. I call it rescued by my parents. They took me into their house. My dad's been a construction guy. So I got back in. I was doing some construction stuff just to kind of get my feet wet back again, working. And I was doing very good. The problem was in Arizona, I was doing road construction and it gets a little bit too hot in the summertime. So they sent me to Oakland, California to go do some work. Mind you, I just got done smoking crack. Every kid listened to Too Short, you know, Oakland, California, home of the rock. Next thing you know, I was there for about 2 days. I went down to the local OG sitting behind the brake station and I asked him if he could score me any crack. Next thing you know, I found it there. So that's when I found out that in order to make a change or to be able to become who you want to be or to even have what you want to have, it's all about the environment, right? I was relocated. I went to a different place, but environment is not the place. Environment is the people that you're around, right? And so that was the thing that changed me is I had to be around good people. So I stopped hanging around the people that were going to, the strippers, the clubs, and I stopped hanging around all that. I went back to my high school friends. I was hanging out with them. I was training again. I was doing good stuff. I was working for a water company selling water, which was part of my gym. And then my friends I had from high school, again, I thought they were my good environments, but they were doing some illegal activity back and forth between here and Hawaii. I went over to Hawaii to bring back some money. Everybody wants to go to Hawaii. I got a nice little trip to go over there. I brought back some money. And then 3 months later, I had the feds, DEA, and everybody at my door. And that started my second life.
Were you selling when you went to Hawaii? Is that what you're referencing?
I was not. Yeah, I was. I said there was drugs that were going back from Arizona to Hawaii. Yes, there was drugs going back, but they got to be so big that the Hawaiians were sending people back to the mainland with money. But it got to be so much that they couldn't get the money back. So we started sending people from Arizona to go to Hawaii. I was one of them. Brought back some money, and the next thing you know, 3 months later, they were under investigation. They already had everything going with the feds in Hawaii. And 3 months later, they came breaking down my door. Oh, wow. Shit, right?
What island was that on?
Oahu. Yep, Oahu. Okay. Yep. And it was getting dispersed to all the other islands too, yeah. Got
it. Drug culture in Hawaii is pretty big.
Huge.
I think the fentanyl, and obviously once it gets on the island and gets into the communities with the young kids, it becomes cultural in that surf culture. And a lot of kids get stuck in it. I've been a part of the Ultimate Hawaiian Trail Run before that helps steer kids away from that type of stuff.
Yes.
And I did not realize until being a part of that event that the drug culture over there is so prevalent.
We had 52 on my indictment. There was only 3 of us from Arizona, and the other 49 were from Hawaii. And then that's when I got sentenced. The last thing that I told the judge, when I had to read my sentencing letter, is I said that I'm sorry for all the kids that I hurt. Right? It wasn't the people, it wasn't the adults. It was the kids because of whether taking their mom and dad away, they got incarcerated, or the drug money that they spent to go buy more drugs. They couldn't buy the kids the food that we were talking about earlier. They couldn't take them to play sports or whatever it was, or they just gave them the iPad so they can go do their dealing. It wasn't about the adults. The adults had the choice to make. Right? The kids don't have the choice to make. And so that's when, right then, when I was talking to the judge, I said, you know what, this is something I apologize. And I want to say sorry to all the kids' life that I hurt, and that's what I do now with Move, is that we take a lot of these young kids and I'm going to give them everything that they haven't had. And I want to build a good foundation for them at a young age so that they can grow into be the person that they want to be, even if it's through some types of obstacles that we hit. I always, one of my analogies that I use is that the buffalo, right? When a storm is coming, every animal is going to run from the storm, right? The buffalo is the only animal that turns around and faces the storm head on, right? As everybody's still running from the storm, you're going to be in that storm until it passes you. The buffalo, they got sunny days tomorrow. So for me in life, I tell these kids here, if there's a storm coming, don't run from it. Turn right into it and face it. Because I ran a bunch because I never thought I could get caught. Right? I kept on going. That storm chased me. Shit, I was in trouble for, I think there was a period of 14 to 17 years of my life. I was on probation, violating probation, because I didn't look at it as a goal. Probation is a goal. That's all it is. If you got a 3-year probation, they're giving you a 3-year goal or a 3-year plan to accomplish. That's all it is. But I wasn't looking at it as a goal. I was looking at it as, fuck this. I already done my time. Oh, you can't tell me what I got to do. I'm an adult. I can make my own choices. That's not true. They're there to help you. Just like with us traders, we put you on a program because we're here to guide you. And that's all it was. But again, it's perspective, right? What do you want to do and how do you see it? At the time there, I thought like I was just having fun and getting in trouble for doing stupid shit. I got on probation. That's okay. You can do that. But again, you should have looked at it like that was your wake-up call. And I didn't. I didn't look at my wake-up call. It could be with food. People should need to look at food as it's a wake-up call. But they don't see it in that. So you have to change your perspective on life or whatever event you're trying to overcome.
How'd you mentioned you had the hookup in a certain part of Arizona. How did you formulate those relationships and get trust from those guys? Like what did it look like getting your foot in the door? Obviously you liked partying, you liked being around the girls, you liked being the guy, and you liked the attention and the status that came with it. But before that, what got you into that space? And were you using before you were selling? Were you selling before you were using? Like, help me understand that.
No, I was selling before. I had a high school friend. His dad had a junkyard. It was down in South Phoenix, and he was a degenerate. He would go down there and he would smoke meth all day long. He'd smoke weed and do whatever, and they would probably sell and transport a little bit. So he was my connection. So I knew that I could get down there. All I had to do was give him a little bit of the product and he would go score it for me. Come to find out, he was going to a lot of the Paisas and he was going to a lot of the Hispanics and he was getting it from them. So for me, speaking Spanish, it was easy. When I went over there, I started speaking Spanish to them. And they're like, okay, this guy is kind of cool. He's not just an informant. He's not a police guy. He's not just some other knucklehead. I actually became, I'll use the word friends with them all. And so I cut the middleman out. And now I became the guy that was able to go down there and pick it all up. So I was able to score my own stuff. But again, though, that's because of who we are. Speaking Spanish, we can fit into certain places. And again, I had a plan. The plan was to be able to take this dude out because I don't trust him. He could get arrested tomorrow, right? Because he's a junkie. He's a get arrested tomorrow. Now I can't score anymore. So again, the business mindset of being a dealer is I had to get to the main guy. And when I did that, I knew I was good. So then I could make more money. I could go get my product whenever I wanted to do it. Again, I just never knew that I would be that main guy would be supplying the drugs for me to use.
Mm-hmm. What was that like? You're making a ton of money. When you started using, was there ever like a cognizant moment where, maybe you woke up with a hangover, maybe you made a bad choice that, could have gone sideways, but you didn't really get caught, but you probably liked the thrill. Were there moments where you looked yourself in the mirror and you're like, whoa, like I never knew I'd be on this path, but it's kind of fun. I'm just going to keep trying to go until I get caught, or, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Let's just keep riding this wave. Like what's going on in your headspace at that time? And did you ever try to exit, and maybe you were fearful of exiting because, they would come after you in some capacity?
Yeah, no, going down there, obviously, like I said, before they knew me from being the dealer. Yeah, they knew me from being the dealer. So I had some good connections. I had some good people down there. Obviously, when they come back or when I go down, I'm like, hey, and they see you like, bro, you don't look clean anymore. And I've always tried to stay clean. I've always tried to match. Even when I was at the worst of my worst, I did not look like I was a drug dealer. I didn't look like I was a drug user. I've always maintained, because again, people are going to judge you, right? If I looked clean, if I looked like I was coherent, 99% of the times people are going to think that you ain't on drugs. So it was that Jekyll and Hyde type kind of thing. I had no problem. I went to Oakland. I was doing everything over there. There's only one time that I really had a bad deal, and I asked myself, like, Chad, what the fuck are you doing? I just took a couple good hits off the crack pipe. I was in Chinatown in San Francisco. I tried to get out of my car. I was parked on the side of the street. I got out, and all of that commotion and people running back and forth, it just caused me to just flip out. I got back in my car, went back to my apartment, done, right? That was one of the only times I could not be out in public, and I had that feeling like people would notice that you're fucked up. That was the only time I had. Shit, I was smoking crack on the airplane in the airplanes, in the bathrooms, right? I'd take it through security. And this is post 9/11. I was able to sneak it on there, and I would be the guy.
What did you do? Where'd you put it?
Yeah, just put it in my bag. I just put it in my bag. Carried it on.
And that didn't pop on a security scan?
TSA doesn't look for drugs.
Interesting.
TSA does not look for drugs. Like nowadays, people take their THC pens. You can take your pens on there. They don't look for drugs.
So what are they looking for? Mostly just liquids?
Yeah, look for bombs and liquids. Yeah, anything such as. Yeah. So I wasn't worried about that. But again, that's pushing the envelope. Well,
it also shows that you were well versed. You knew that. I mean, most people would be like, "Oh, this could be a prison sentence by just walking through." I mean, you look at what happened to what's the female basketball player's name who had the weed pen in Russia?
Brittany Griner.
Brittany Griner. Yeah, I mean, that's a classic example, right? Like, they may not be looking for it, but maybe something else tips them off, or
you're talented.
Yeah. So was your heart just racing before getting on a plane, or was that part of the thrill? What can I get away with?
That's part of the thrill. It's what can I get away with? And people ask me, they're like, Chad, why don't you stress? I do not stress, right? Because I cannot control things. And especially now it's even lesser because I've put myself in situations, walking through the airport with a whole bunch of money strapped on you post 9/11 going through. And now this wasn't when you had the hand up radar ones, this was still, we just had the old metal detector that you walked through. But walking through the airport with a shitload of money on you, that's stressful.
What's a shitload of money? How much money did you have?
It was over 10 grand. It was over 20 grand. It was over 30 grand, right?
Wow.
It was a lot. Yeah.
And you had to deliver that to people, or how did that cut get split?
Yeah, as soon as I got back, I had to drop it off to the main guys. Yep, I had to drop it off.
And they knew exactly how much, or did you ever try to pay yourself or take some, or how did that work?
No. You're here to do a job. You go over there. We'll get you a trip to Hawaii. We'll give you some free money, money to take care of. You just got to bring this back. And that wasn't the first one. People have done that before, so I knew it could be done. And that's also another thing for me is that if somebody else has done it, then I know I can do it, but probably do it better, right?
And also goes to show that you were building trust, because I'm sure they were counting that money to make sure that you weren't trying to slip some, for yourself.
Yep. One of my clients I have right now, he was he's still trying to get out of that criminal activity and enterprise. He had $2 million. One of his guys, Maserati Rick, that was out of Detroit, got busted with some money, and there was $2 million that was there. When this case came back around, there was 1.97 that was actually confiscated. And so when they went to my client, they says, hey, here's what we have you for trafficking and for this whole enterprise. He hired his attorney, and he has a note, from the main guys that he has to give the money to, cartel, whatnot. And the note is for $2 million. And so he told his attorney, he says, you might want to look at the cops that were on this case, because there's 197. There's 300,000 missing somewhere, right? But he knew what he had to bring back. So again, now this goes back in. Somebody's going to get exposed. At the end of the day, there's a value to something, and somebody knows what that price is. Again, trust, whether it be the authority or whether it be the person, whether it be the mule, whatever it is. But again, it's who do you trust? And obviously for me, I'm a trustworthy person. I'm going to do everything, even that's here. I tell them, trust me, I'll help you get you better, because I have results, and my results are, I was asked to do a job, bring money back, and shit, I'll do that.
Yeah, for real. Do you think that, I mean, you mentioned a potentially dirty cop that maybe snagged some of the money along the way. Do you think the government is involved in cartels and drug trafficking, but they only go after people when they're not getting their cut or when something starts to go wrong?
But it's tough because when I got out, I work with a lot of border patrol people now. I work with the undercover. Within the first year I was out, I worked with a whole bunch of undercover police officers from the city of Mesa. From the city of Phoenix. I thought for sure I was getting set up where they were trying to set me up again, right? But again, I was clear and I was doing everything. It's tough because a lot of these cops, they try to go in and they try to get you out of that system when you've been arrested. Uh, and I just think that it's an easy way for the government, the municipalities, with this RICO Act that's out there now. It's an easy way for them to pick up money. And then again, they control the borders as well. They control the borders, so they can control what comes in or what doesn't come in. The drug game has been around for a long time. It's one of the biggest things that we know we have to stop. But again, like you said, the cartels are the best business guys out there, and they're going to find a way to make it happen. I've seen, like, this time of year right now from Arizona and probably from Tijuana in California, uh, a secret that goes in with the methamphetamines is that it's liquid. You can make it and turn it into liquid. So what they're doing right now this time of year, they're putting in peanut oil cans, so it looks like peanut oil, and then they're bringing it across the border. Because again, we got to fry the turkeys, right? So everything is seasoned. There's a reason for everything that comes across, and there's a way behind it all too. They're savvy.
And that's where it translates well to the entrepreneurial mindset, right?
Correct.
Like you're finding ways to be innovative. You're learning freaking chemistry. You're learning how these substances stay in liquid, stay in rock form, how they can be translated or mixed with baking soda or certain things to try to scale them, to try to make more money where, it looks a certain way, it feels a certain way, it smells a certain way, but, maybe you're diluting the product a little bit so that you can maximize a small dose into a bigger dose and make more money. It's very interesting. I feel like I'm watching a movie while talking with you.
Well, have you seen the cocaine cowboy, the guy that just came out, Owen Wilson? He's out of California. Used to be a USC football player. He was there with Matt Leinart. He was a walk-on. He was a walk-on. He just got released from prison. His story, Mark Wahlberg took over his story, and they did this whole thing. It was on Amazon Prime. It's called Cocaine Cowboy. Cocaine Quarterback. Long story short, they were taking, and he got hooked up on this big whole thing, but they were taking cocaine, they were breaking it down, and they were putting it in wine, and then they were sending it over to Australia. Because Australia had a hard way of getting, they got really strict borders and everything else, but they found a way that they could melt it down, put it into wine. If there's a will, there's a way. Right. And that's the business. That's the business side. When COVID shut us down, if there's a will, there's a way. We got to be able to figure out a way to do this. We will survive. We just got to come up with a new plan. We have a new plan. They're protecting the borders right now. They're putting these walls up. Well, then perfect. Let's get these drones to fly over the wall. Shit happens. Let's get it. It's simple. And they're one step ahead. The underground world is one step ahead of everything we see on the streets. It is.
Yeah, it's fascinating. But if you take that, you talked about it before, you can be a movement engineer. You can be a rehab artist. Now you're looking at a joint and you have traditional knowledge from exercise science, physiology, anatomy, but you have the courage to push back against that a little bit and maybe try some different modalities. Try things like the voodoo floss band, banded distractions, different types of healing things that maybe you're pulling some from Chinese medicine, some from Western medicine, and you're creating this customized concoction to unlock belief in people. And then based on that belief, you create momentum in the right direction to help them get back. And so now it kind of makes sense full circle how the criminal mind translates to the movement mind and the business mind.
Well, you got to think outside the box. Everybody is inside the box. Everybody's inside the box. Here's what I know. Here's what I see on social media now. Here's what I see on Instagram. Here's all the CEUs that I've taken. They're all talking about the same thing. They're trying to reinvent the wheel right now. There's only one way the wheel spins, right? They're putting new terms like the pails and cars and rails. They're using all these terms now. That's called mobility work. It's not, there's nothing that we haven't done in the 80s with this stuff, right? but it's not as flashy. It doesn't sell. I can't monetize it. And I think now everything is just about being monetized. If you look at a lot of trainers that are out there, they're all having their own certifications now because I can sell the same formula. I can sell the same methodology. I'm just putting I'm putting lipstick on it, and just making it look sexier, which I think that's what we have in this world nowadays. Everything's filtered. Everything's filtered. And when I wrote this book and when I tell my story and I do interviews, is that I'm the only one that's vulnerable, right? There's nothing filtered with me because I've done it all. I've got into trouble. I've got out of trouble. I've built things. If I was to put any filter when COVID came around and I told people, hey, we're doing very well. My wife and I, when we opened up Move, she's a bartender. I did not expect her to be here at all. But when we got busy and we started doing things with the city, obviously, like you talked about, you have to get permits, certifications, you have to have checks going down. I mean, there's a lot of other administration work that has to happen. I couldn't do it because I was too busy servicing people. So my wife came here. She was working with me full time. I want to say it was in 2019, 2020, we had to sell our house. Right? We had to sell our house because, we weren't making enough money. We had two incomes into one place. But again, I wasn't fearful on that because I've already been at the bottom before. My dad told me when we started moving, he was my investor. He says, are you ready to lose your house and ready to lose your family? I've already lost everything. I got out of prison. I rebuilt it. I can do it again if that happens. But I am not going to let that happen. He says, well, how do you know that? I said, because I haven't relapsed yet, because I make the right choices, right? And you mentioned, I think at the beginning of this podcast, you mentioned the word drive. And that's what it is. It's about having a drive, I will work harder than anybody on the streets. I will work harder than the biggest crackhead that's out there. I will work harder than the best CEO that's out there. And right now, that's what I'm doing is I'm trying to continue to build me and my business and my methodology, my message. And I want to reach more people. It's hard to reach people inside four walls, right? Especially with these kids that come in right now. We talked about it. Half of these kids don't even want it. So I have to push them to be able to do this. I don't like to use the word motivation. I'm not trying to be a motivational speaker because if I have to motivate you, you're my wrong person, right? I want you to be motivated to come to me so that I can inspire you. I'm not trying to influence you either because I've done a lot of stupid shit that I should not influence you by. But again, the word comes back to inspiration. I've done things continuously over and over and over. I've built things, including my whole life back. I can inspire you to do the same thing.
Fired up over here, man. When you were incarcerated, what was that experience like? Because modern day, everybody's distracted. They don't spend time with themselves. There's too many choices to make as far as Netflix or all the different streaming systems. It's easy to scroll. It's easy to buy things at any point. Food can be delivered to your doorstep very easily. What was that experience, like you said, between four walls? Were you learning? Were you educating? Were you practicing your faith? How'd you stay out of trouble? How'd you reset and recalibrate your mind so when you got out, you had this upward trajectory towards service and taking accountability for your actions?
What we talked about earlier was breathing, right? As soon as I walked off the bus and I'm shackled from my hands to my waist to my feet to my head, and you're on your clinking in chains. I've never been to prison before. So
you were
I don't know
shackled like that, like
Oh, yeah.
how you would see it in a movie. Wow.
Yeah, I was even on Con Air when I was on Con Air because they took me from Arizona to Oklahoma City to the major transfer center in Oklahoma City. I flew on my first Con Air flight, shackled from the waist to the feet, and then we were also chain linked to the floor, so you couldn't get up. I didn't think that was too safe. If the plane went down, who's going to come and unlock all the prisoners? They ain't worried about us, right? And that's the other thing. The FBI, the marshals, they have a parachute on their back, right, in case something did go down. So again, that's what I learned about your life is expected. We're not worried about you, so don't even worry about us. So I was transported. I went from Oklahoma City. I went to Riverside. I spent probably 3 weeks in San Bernardino County Jail while I was waiting to get onto LAX, where they put me onto a United flight, and then they shipped me back over to Hawaii. So again, it was a full adventure. I call it 9 weeks in hell, but it was something that I had to do, obviously, because I got in trouble. I fought my case on the streets for 3 years or for a year and a half. The first thing of like stress, anxiety, fear, my fiance or my wife now, she dropped me off at the Federal Marshal's building to self-surrender. I gave her a kiss and said, hopefully I see you in 30 months. That was the first thing about my stress, right? Walking away from your loved one, walking into the Marshal's building and say, hi, my name's Chad Dunn. I'm here to self-surrender. I got a 30-month sentence. Please turn around, give me your hand so I can put this. So I've been in those different situations. When I got to the federal prison, the bus pulled up out front. They started walking us off of there. And I remember the biggest thing, I walked through the gates. Take a deep old breath and reset yourself. You got this. You got this, right? Stay low key. Pay attention to your surroundings. Just like we would tell anybody in life, right? But now they're on their phone all day long. They're not paying attention to the surroundings. They don't know what the heck is going on. So the first thing I tell people is that if you want to really focus on what you want to do and the task at hand, you have to breathe. And we talked about that earlier. So sitting there, my first day, I wake up, I got this guy, he looked like just like Porky Pig. Came up, he says, Dunn, you with me, right? And I was on the construction maintenance crew. Normally, you're there for about a week before you have to go through your orientation and they give you a job. I don't know what it was, but somehow when I checked in, I must have made a good impression on somebody because the next morning I had a guy at my bed. He says, Dunn, get up. You're going to work with me. So that one got me right back into a routine, right? I built a visitation center while I was in prison. I was a lead construction guy that we built a whole big mass facility through concrete. I did a whole bunch of stuff, but I continued prison like it was still my life, right? I got up, I worked every day. I worked from 6 o'clock in the morning. I worked till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I got home. We had a 10,000 square foot weight pile there. My buddies, I had a couple friends that were in there. We'd go lift weights every day. I carried on what a normal life would be inside there. I don't watch TV just because, like we talked about electronics, I called the TV the dummy box, right? There's nothing that you can learn from the TV. It just wastes the time. I've seen people sit there all day long for hours upon hours upon hours watching Jerry Springer while I went to school to get an associate's degree in business marketing because we had a teacher that would come in at night times and he would teach classes from the community college. So I even took up education in there, right? I used my time productively. I didn't sit there again. I wasn't the victim. Right? I was going to make the best of my time. It was just a little break that I had to do for 30 months. Right? Mm-hmm. To this day, I went and met one of my best friends. You know, his name's Robbie Kessling. He's in my book. He did 19 and a half years. His first day, he got out. Now, he went in with a Nokia flip phone, and he got out with an iPad. Downtown San Diego, he had to go to the WeWork station, that was WeWork building that was downtown. He walked from the halfway house and went over there. But Robbie was one of my guys that was dialed in, jiu-jitsu guy, world champion, had some drug stuff going from Canada to Washington. And when he got hired on with his company, when he got out, and we all have the same mindset, the HR lady looked at him. She says, well, Mr. Kessling, I'm going to have to put you in here as the janitor, you know, because again, obviously where you're coming from. He says, I don't care if you put me in this bitch as the janitor. I'm going to come out as the CEO. And that's that CEO mindset, right? Mm-hmm. I think right now in the last 4 years, he's 11 or 12% ownership of the company. They do all the public safety stuff from LA to Miami, Hawaii. They do all the big buildings, New York. So they retrofit everything. But again, it's that CEO mindset that there's not one thing that we cannot do.
Sounds like rock bottom became your rebirth, man. It's really cool, really special.
Yep. Well, I tell Jackie, my wife, I tell her my birthday is when I turned 35. That's when I started living again.
That's cool.
No.
Tell me about the book, man. Like what inspired the book and how did you eventually sit down and put all of these stories into a framework that you can now sell? It's a product. It is something you can speak on. You're on a podcast tour right now, and it's things that are real life, but also really valuable to give people a step-by-step process from rock bottom.
Yeah. Well, before I started Move, I was working with a client, and she mentioned to me, she said, and she didn't know my history, right? Nobody knew my history until 2021. I did a podcast called Make the Difference, right? And that was the first time. This was a friend of mine from third grade. He knew about all my trials and tribulations I went to. He knew all the trouble that I got into. I started training him. He was going for a world championship for jiu-jitsu. So he's out here with Carlson Gracie. And he said, Chad, he goes, I want you to come on my podcast and tell your story. Now, mind you, we just opened up Move 4 years prior. I told my wife about it, and she says, do not mention Move. Please do not mention Move. And I said, why is that? She said, well, because we train kids. We train a lot of people. And I know they're quick to judge. People are very quick to judge. They see inmate, they see felon. They're going to be judging. We're trying to build our business. So I said, okay, do me a favor. Let me do this podcast. I won't say Move. I won't post on our social media. I won't do any of that stuff. And so I did this podcast. I let her listen to it all. And she said, man, this is unbelievable. This is unbelievable. Everybody has to hear this. So now I had a double confirmation. I had my bad story, but then I also had the lady that told me, hey, you should write a book. So 2000, while I was waiting to open up Move 2017, I went and spoke with this lady. Her name was Laura Bush from Peacock Proud Publishing. I sat down, I gave her my story, told her my transformation, told her what I want to do. Move wasn't even open yet. It was just a vision, right? But she got so emotionally involved with it all. We left the meeting, she was crying. She goes, "You have a great story," right? I said, "How much is it to write this book?" And she gave me the total of $25,000. That's not $25,000 that I have to spend on the book. I have to put that back into Move. I'm just opening up. So I had to put the book on hold. Last year, I turned 50. So my wife contacted Laura in February. She said, for Chad's 50th birthday, I want to give him this book writing process for his birthday present. So that's how the book got started. For me, I tell her that's the best gift I ever had because that's the gift that keeps giving, right? I can give it to you when you read it. I can give it to anybody else around the world. So I'm giving my gift of what I have done to help make this transformation. I got a crazy life. I've done a lot of good stuff. I've got out of a lot of good things. So I sat down with Laura. She put me with the ghostwriter. His name is James. Awesome guy. He was a TV movie guy in LA. Now he lives in Colorado. So we sat down and we started just conversing, right, over Zoom. And he said, "Man, you got a lot of information. Right? We have to start funneling this and we have to start creating an outline." So now I get to learn about writing. I never knew anything about writing. I wish I would have paid a little bit more attention to school instead of doing all the fun stuff. But we broke this down. We had an outline. We had thesis statements for every one of my chapters. We had key topics. We had a whole bunch of stuff. And it was good because it was like designing a program, right? There was structure. We had structure. We started the first chapter and he said, "Take this outline and get rid of it." I said, "Well, why is that?" He says, "Because we're going to go with this story. We're going to go with this story because it is just unbelievable." And so we did it just like a business plan, right? If you have your initial business plan, I didn't expect COVID to hit, but I threw that original business plan out the window. We got to adapt on the fly. Again, lifestyles in the streets, lifestyles of a CEO. We're going to have to adapt on the fly. And so we did that when we were writing this book, and we came out that every chapter was going to be a code on a transformation. But more importantly, every chapter can be a topic of discussion to do a speaking gig. So my book is really a tool that I can use to help me get some public speaking.
That's great, man. I got to meet those people. I want to connect with them and get our book vision off the ground. It's really cool when you can converse because it feels like hiking Mount Everest when you want to put a book into reality and make it tangible, and just sitting down and writing is great, but the mind doesn't work that way. It dances around from this point to that point, which is fun and cool to explore on a podcast, but having a structured framework from point A to point B to point C
so
in
crucial.
book fashion is awesome. And I'm excited for you to go on a speaking tour and share your experiences with people and inspire them. Have you started that, or is that starting with the podcast? Then you'll eventually get in front of audiences.
No, I've done audiences before, and the thing about it too is like with public speaking is that you have to have scripts, right? A lot of your speeches are written. But what I've found along the way is that a lot of these scripts and speeches are written by people that are just telling you how to do this stuff. They're not the ones that have actually done it. So every script that I write when I do my speaking, they sound great. It's professionally written. I have a good outline. I've got a good body to it. And every time I go to speak, I crumble it up. I put it in my pocket and I speak from the heart. Right?
That's cool.
Because that's what's authentic. I try to follow it, and I freestyle. It's like a freestyle rapper. I can freestyle so much more because, again, I speak with passion. I speak with passion. Awesome. I speak with experiences. I'm not trying to bore the crowd like, "Oh, here comes this other guy speaking about this." When I sit down to my high school kids and I do my auditoriums and I went to the things, I see everybody sitting in the stands. The first thing I do, I walk up to all the kids. I say, "Hey, any of y'all got any of those blues? You got any fentanyl that I can take real quick? I'm a little nervous. I need something to calm me down. Hey, can I go take your vape pen and go hit it in the bathroom real quick?" And they look at me like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" I say, I'm one of you. I've been in that seat before, right? Mm-hmm. And I was just asking. I got your attention now, don't I? Because most of these guys ain't even talk about fentanyl. They don't know what the hell they're about a vape pen or whatever. But I wanted to make sure that I can relate with them on all levels, right? And it starts from the young levels. You have to get to these kids young. So I like to do that. My big thing now is I want to try to get a good 5,000, 10,000 speaking gig, of people. I've got a buddy right now with one of our companies out here that's trying to hook me up. And it's going to be about, it can be about optimism. I can speak about, the CEO. I can talk differently to inmates and people that are trying to recover than I talk different to people that are on a CEO, different podcasts, filling out your interviewer, filling out the host of it all. What can we talk about? it's free, and for me, it's something that I want to do, and I want to be able to touch people. I've done podcasts from Dubai, I've done England, I've done Vancouver, I've done them all around the world, and again, it's the same message. Like we said, you got to have a little dog in you, and you're going to have to struggle. And I tell people my key message is that you have to learn to struggle in the right direction. Life is a struggle daily, but when you struggle in the right direction, good things happen.
This is fun to chop it up. Where can people find you?
Mindovervirtuallyeverything.com is one of our websites. If you want to see the action that's happening inside Move and the great things that we do of helping people overcome illnesses and adversities and injuries, moveperformance.com. And then again, all the social media links, I got Move Performance and then Chad Dunn 22.
Very cool, man. Well, I appreciate you giving us a peek behind the curtain today and sharing
the
peaks and valleys from your story, man.
Well, if you read the book, right, it's a great read, not just because I wrote it, but there's a lot of wisdom in there. And the feedback has just been excellent, from all different levels and people like, it's something that I need. And that's what it is. It's about giving you hope and inspiration.
Yeah, man. Wow. Very cool, man.
Non-provider owner of physical therapy. That's the biggest thing right there for business people. Right?
I love it, man. Where are you guys specifically located if somebody wanted to come out and see you?
We're in Chandler, Arizona, right, which is just probably 20 minutes outside of Phoenix. In Chandler, Arizona Avenue and Elliott are crossroads, but if they reach out even via email, anything else, I'm always available to talk to anybody and help give them any type of solutions that they might need. Again, we all have problems, but we all need solutions. I'm not a problem picker, I'm a solution giver.
I love that, man. Guys, if you enjoyed my conversation with Chad Dunn today, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And as always, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Until next time.
Stay hard.
Thanks,
stay hard. Yep. Stay hard like that Advil over there. The Smith man.